I've not done a video for about a week because, to be honest, until Friday, bugger all was happening. But I think since Friday, it's been a really interesting and quite busy couple of days for United. All it kicked off with the news on, I think it was Thursday night, that the increased bid for Bryan Mbeumo had gone in. One that they seemed quite confident was actually going to be accepted this time, given that the first two had been bounced back. The fee, I think, is being touted as being 65 with 6 in additional add-ons. I think the fee isn't really the main issue for me with this one. I think the fee has always been pretty much what most people expected it to be. Brentford were publicly saying they wanted a fee of around a similar amount that we paid for Cunha, which I think is fair enough, to be perfectly honest. I think the hold-up seemed to be more about the structure of the deal, not necessarily the fee. United must have been pretty okay with the fee because they didn't sort of walk away from it. The way it was structured and the way our finances are at the moment was always going to be quite crucial because we haven't got 65 million quid to fork out in one go. When you look into some of the details that have been released, the fact that this is spread out over 4 years makes a hell of a difference, because that then works out that we're paying 16.5 million quid a year for the next 4 years. That doesn't sound too shabby. The 6 million in additional add-ons, that could be anything. It could be dependent on something winning the Ballon d'Or or anything. So although the media is obviously going to focus on it, they're going to add his wages into all this to come up with some astronomical fee that we're supposed to have paid for him. The actual fee that we're paying, 60 million quid a year for the next 4 years, to me sounds a bit of a bargain. To be honest, I'm not fussed that this 65 million quid is a large fee, because that does seem to be the going concern at the moment. Lots of players are going for vastly inflated fees currently, and this is just the way it was going to be to get him and Cunha in for less than Liverpool played for Florian Wirtz. I'm okay with that. To be honest, I don't have too much of an issue. I was quite glad, and I'm not remotely surprised that it all happened at the end of last week, because for me, I think the most pressing concern was him going to America. Yes, it would have been nice if he'd have been in for the first 2 weeks of pre-season. That would have been the ideal. Whether that was particularly likely or not is open to debate. But I think the fact that he's on the plane for the trip to America, because we're there for the best part of 2 weeks, that was always going to be quite significant. Getting him in, getting his medical done over the weekend, I presume it's going on as we speak, more or less. But getting him in and on the flight was always going to be the most important thing. And we fly out on Tuesday, so we've got a couple of days to get it done. I don't think that's the end of our transfer business, to be honest. Nothing is going to be quite so pressing, I don't think, as the need to get him in before we fly to America. But that doesn't mean to say that the other transfers that we could possibly have lined up aren't important. They're just not as important as getting Bryan Mbeumo and Matheus Cunha in before the pre-season tour to America started. That news and the resolution to a process and a saga that was about 6 weeks in the making was more relief than anything else. I didn't necessarily doubt that we were going to get him. I'm just glad that we did, because I'm sick of hearing about it, to be honest. But yeah, I think all in all, a very positive conclusion to last week, and sent us into the game against Leeds on Saturday in quite a positive frame of mind to see us getting 2 decent bits of business done before the first pre-season game. I think was good for supporters more than anything else. As it was, we flew to Stockholm for a game against Leeds United. I think I've said before on previous videos, I'm not a massive fan of pre-season games and the way that they're hyped up now to such an extent that they're almost treated like the first game of the season rather than a competitive run out, which is all they really are. Leeds, the fact that it was Leeds, I suppose, maybe adds a little bit more spice to it, but not a great deal. They're in exactly the same boat as we were. They had on their bench, they had a player they signed yesterday or the day before. Nobody takes these games as seriously as fans do, to my mind. I think from a player's perspective, I think it's good to have a competitive run. They only ever play 45 minutes anyway. Certainly in the first games, if they get that, they've done well. It's not unknown for people to get half an hour like Maguire did yesterday. But fans and media go completely over the top with every single little thing that happens at the moment. United played out a relatively drab 0-0 draw with a Leeds team that had brief moments where they looked threatening. United had brief moments where they looked threatening in the last quarter of an hour or so. And other than that, not a great deal happened, to be perfectly honest. There was a couple of highlights. I'm not really asked about Leeds performances. But I think from United's point of view, I think Cunha had a very promising first 45 minutes. He looked like he did when he was at Wolves, as he would. But that sort of stuff is what we have sorely lacked for a number of years. I've said it before about defenders and what have you, about being on the front foot, and it's nice to have a forward that's on the front foot too. When he got the ball, he was always sort of going forward. He was always running at people, which we don't have enough of. He's got good feet. He makes sensible decisions. He gets himself in some really good positions, and that's pretty much what you saw in the 45 minutes that he played yesterday. He wasn't pulling up any trees. He doesn't need to. They've been back in training for 2 weeks, but I think it was nice to see a glimpse of what he could bring to us when we have a settled side and we're playing proper competitive matches. Nothing out of the ordinary, as I say, but it was nice to see him play and look like the player that we the player that we were hoping we'd signed. Aside from that, there wasn't really too much to go on, I don't think. Diego Leon, for his first 45 minutes for the club, he's 18, doesn't know the players around him, doesn't know the language, doesn't really know the club particularly well, but it was combative. He made stupid decisions. He made good decisions. He overlapped quite a bit. And I think there's reasons to be quietly optimistic that when he settles down, he's been here a couple of years, we could have a really good player on our hands there. Other than that, from the first half, I don't think there was an awful lot to get too excited about. Yeah, it was just it was a bit of a pedestrian first half. Lots of misplaced passes, lots of tackles that were being lost, poor positions, just the usual sort of pre-season type of shit. The fact that we then played a completely separate team in the second half and actually played quite a bit better, I would have said. Not great by any stretch of the imagination, but they looked a little bit more cohesive than they looked in the first half. Central to that, what I think was Tom Heaton, who looks like the keeper that we need to be starting the season with. Onana's probably not going to be fit anyway. Bayindir, I don't have a great deal of confidence in him anyway. And while Tom Heaton is sort of 39, I think he is, he's competent enough. He's not shit. He knows what to do. And he has a bit of a calmness about him that you don't necessarily get from the other two, the keepers that we have at the moment. He did a couple of nice saves. Obviously kept it to 0-0 a couple of times. Yeah, I think he did himself a lot of favours in a relatively uncompetitive game. Similarly, Lenny Euro, I think is for a 19-year-old lad, his calmness and his confidence is what we lack in the back three. In this system, a lot of our build-up play is going to be coming from our centre-backs. That's the way Amorim plays. That's the way Amorim played at Sporting. There's a lot more emphasis on the creativity in the back three than there is on the creativity in the middle two. And I think seeing somebody like Euro, and whether people like it or not, Harry Maguire, being able to distribute the ball and take the ball forward with a bit of confidence and a bit of competence, I think I think it's going to be really beneficial to us going forward. Lots is being made about Euro's crossfield passes to Dorgu and Mount and what have you. That is Amorim's game in a nutshell. It is about pulling people and pulling sides to one side and then getting a creative centre half being able to hit these crossfield balls to switch play as effectively as he does. And Lenny Euro did that really well yesterday. Is it going to be more difficult when the league starts? Of course it is, but I think it was a nice snapshot of the sort of play that we're going to be seeing quite a bit from Lenny Euro going forward this coming season. I think he had a really positive 45 minutes. Maguire had a positive half an hour. I would expect people to see a lot more of this going forward, and if Martinez gets fit and has a similar sort of distribution, which he does, we could have a quite a creative back three, which not bypasses the midfield so much, but has more of an emphasis on it to create more than maybe the midfield does at the moment. Other than that, I don't think there was too much else really going on. I think Patrick Dorgu had a good half as well. And again, I think this was more of a snapshot of what we can expect from him going forward. I think there was little glimpses of that last year, but coming in mid-season isn't always best for any player, and for a young player especially, that makes it quite a little bit more challenging. But I think he looked a lot more settled. He looked to be a lot more aware of what was being expected of him, and actually contributed quite a bit when he was doing it. I'm not getting over the top with anybody yesterday, but I think those three, I think Heaton, Euro and Dorgu, had very pleasing 45 minutes yesterday. The result, not really asked. We could have won it. We could have lost it. We didn't get beat, I suppose. I'm not a massive fan of us getting beat in any game, but it was more of a competitive run out rather than a competitive match, if that makes any sense. We go to America on Tuesday. We play teams that have finished around where we did last year. Now, whether that was conscious decision or not, I'm not quite sure. Whether we just couldn't get games against the bigger sides because they frankly see other teams at the moment as being a bigger draw than United. That's fair enough. But I think a couple of games against teams that would outperformed us a little bit last season in certain points. I think it could be a good barometer of where we are this summer, not where we are going forward in the league, but I think as a snapshot of the progress that we made in pre-season, I think that might be quite useful. Finally, on top of that, was the news that probably a lot of people missed because they were watching a match or wasn't watching a match and were busy doing something not remotely connected to football at all. And that was the news that a deal has been agreed with United and Barcelona for the loan of Matheus Cunha. This, for me, was probably the most important player to get out the door this summer. That's not to say I don't think getting rid of Garnacho and Anthony and that sort of stuff isn't important, but I think as we needed to put a bit of a marker down and get somebody that was the biggest name, certainly, in that lot out the door. By all accounts, he's going on a 12-month loan with Barcelona covering all of his wages with an option to buy. Now, the devil will be in the details, certainly around the option to buy. We've had this before and got our fingers burnt with Sancho not that long ago. But I think the fact that Rashford was never going to get back in at United, he only seemingly wanted to go to Barcelona, so he must have had a very good indication that Barcelona would be coming in for him and just to sit tight. Nobody was going to pay for him. Nobody was going to pay what we wanted for him and then pay his wages on top of that. This, for me, is probably the best of everyone could expect. United have got a player that was never going to be getting back in the side out the door, and somebody's covering his whole wages. That saves us around over $1 million to $1.5 million each month just on Marcus Rashford's wages, and Barcelona paying all of that. If he does well in Barcelona, you've got to fancy that they would be inclined to keep him. If he does well in Barcelona and they don't keep him, then somebody else will appreciate how well Rashford has played for them and be more willing to go and buy him. That, for me, is probably as good as we could get. He puts himself in the shop window, in a very large shop window, hopefully plays well, gets a bit more interest or convinces Barcelona that their money spent on him would be a wise investment, and then we all move on. I've got no hate for Marcus Rashford. I think he's let himself down and let us down for the last 2 years, but I don't hate him for that. I just don't anything, really. And I'm glad to see the back of him because we don't need him. We need the money more than we need him, and we have done for probably most of those last 2 years. Get him out the door. Let us get rid of that sideshow. We don't need to worry about him. We don't need to pay any of his wages, and we can get him out the door and everyone moves on. That, for me, was a big step in the right direction. Hopefully, the next week or two, we'll have more positive performances in pre-season, and we'll be able to start to move on some of the players that we still have lingering around, namely Sancho and Garnacho. Those are the two that I want to see the back of. Next, if we can get rid of them, I'm not too asked about the rest of them. I suppose the one thing that did flag up for me yesterday was the information that we inquired about Ekitike on Wednesday, knowing full well the price that was being asked for him. To see the price that Liverpool have now agreed to pay for him, I think 90 million quid, does leave you wondering, why was we inquiring about him if we knew what his price was going to be? Do we have more money than has been sort of suggested? Do we have confidence that the players that we've got that are for sale are nearly out the door and going to be sold and will leave us with a lot more money? And if that's the case, what sort of forwards does that allow us to go for? Because we all know there's a couple of gaps in the squad at United. We need a keeper, we need a striker, we need a central midfielder, one of each at the very least. For most of us, I think we probably felt, well, we ain't got the money, so we're probably going to be scrabbling around and do amend until next summer. But looking at the players that we're looking at, this sudden link coming up with Sesko, whether that's from his side or our side, I'm not quite sure. I'm assuming his. But it does make you wonder that if we're starting to look and inquire about people that we've always considered to be way out of our price range, have we got more money? And if we have, could we actually buy somebody really, really good? Hopefully an answer to that sort of question will come out over the next week or so. But let me know your thoughts. What do you think is going on with these inquiries about people that we seemingly don't have the money to buy? Let me know in the comments. Like, share, subscribe if you've enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.